From Mauka to Makai, Hawaii is home to thousands of plant species. At the University of Hawaii at Manoa, a dedicated team is working to share these species with the world by turning the physical digital.
The Joseph F. Rock Herbarium was founded in the early 1900s by Joseph F. Rock, and since then it has grown to a collection of about 55,000 specimens. Our collection focuses mostly on native and endemic flowering plants in Hawaii. We also have a very large collection of ferns that are native to Hawaii and lichens as well. And so we have a great repository of species that maybe were once abundant in the early 1900s and now are really hard to find in nature. We have a great historical record of where those species were before our islands became more developed. When I started here as director in 2020, I wanted to make sure that our collection was preserved. And so one way to do that is to digitize our whole collection, meaning take photos of it and put it online. And so I applied for federal funding from the National Science Foundation and was awarded a grant to help us with the digitization project.
Here we have a sample of Jatropha, which is from Guam here. You can see on the label. So usually the first step is to just make sure that it's free of any debris on top of the paper so that we can take a good picture. So I take this brush and I just brush off any, usually it's beetle dung or just pieces of plant that have fallen off from it being so old. This specimen is from 1975. So after that, I put it into the photo box, and we have it set up so that you can take a picture with just clicking on the screen. So you take a picture, it takes a few seconds to load, and then we grab it out of here and to rename it so that there's a name here on this barcode, and we want the name on the computer to match the name on here. So we just scan the barcode and it transfers that abscission number onto the file on the computer. And then we just stamp it, imaged, and that's one specimen done.
By digitizing our specimens, we allow a greater number of researchers across the world to actually access our collection. We're pretty remote, so having them accessible online is really helpful. And researchers can use the online database to see what specimens we have. Helps them maybe request loans where we actually would send them a specimen and they could look at those specimens, maybe collect small samples from them. But also researchers can now just study the trends over time, see where species were historically, where they are or are not now, and measure traits on those specimens as well, all through the digital specimens we're putting online. So the plant specimens have a lot of information not only on the label, but also within the tissues themselves. So for example, you can extract DNA from those specimens and use that to study the evolution of groups of plants. So by studying things like that, we can understand how species are changing naturally through processes of evolution, but also potentially in response to climate change that's affecting our islands and Pacific Islands more generally. A lot of our native flora here in Hawaii is disappearing, whether due to climate change or human development or loss of pollinators. A large proportion of the native plants are threatened or endangered. And so having this historical record allows us to study those plants as they existed tens to almost 100 years ago now. And it allows us to have this record of biodiversity that for many people, we can't see it anymore. So it's a nice repository of that historical biodiversity and a reminder of sort of what we're losing. The benefits of this project, aside from the digitization and preservation of our specimens, is also the engagement of students in the research. We have a mighty crew of undergraduates who are helping us with the process, and through that process, getting hands-on experience with the scientific process and contributing to research.
I think what I like the most is that we are actually creating like a whole specimen that the first didn't have any information on it. So starting from data collection and then mounting and the whole process, the way that we actually create the specimen available to other scientists. I think that's really important and what I love about specimens. Sometimes those plants are extinct or they're in the location that we cannot access. So by having that specimen, we can totally use them as resources. But not only that, but we know these Hawaiian plants were here, and then they can potentially found in the future.
Here in Hawaii, in the Pacific, this herbarium is so important because it just acts as a permanent record for all the different diversity that we have here in this part of the world, and there's no other place like it. And it's so important because here in Hawaii, there's this belief that we come from the land, and at the end of our lifespan, then we return to the land as well. So these plants that we have here in the herbarium, they represent our mo'oku'auhau, our genealogy, and just ultimately, it's important to have an understanding of these specimens across time and to have accessibility for these things as well, so that people all over the state, all over the Pacific, can also have a better understanding of them.